Dynamite. Welcome to Jazz Vespers here in the historical First Reformed Church of Schenectady. We welcome you for a deep breath before you jump into the week, and it will be made better by two gentlemen up here on the stage. Mike Lampkin from Loudonville, who's doing all the tune calling, and Jeff McCrae, who's playing drums. And he gets credit for coming the farthest today because he lives in North Bennington, Vermont, and drives over the hill to get here to Schenectady. And I got to say, I was sitting in the chair, and usually when I'm here, I'm here, and the drummer is over there. And you know, I can really hear the drums. When you do the snare drum, I was looking to see what was boiling on the pot. I just, Very good. Our theme is togetherness, so that song was called Alone Together. And we're going to use that as kind of a theme within what we do for you tonight. And I'm going to run a risk, and I'm going to read a poem about marriage. It's the most togetherness that I've ever experienced for 70 years or something like that. It's by Rumi. Then Almitra spoke again and said, "And what of marriage, master?" And he answered, saying, "You were born together, and together you shall be forevermore. You shall be together when white wings of death scatter your days, and you shall be together even in the silent memory of God. But let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another your bread, but not eat from the same loaf. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be somewhat alone. Even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. Give your hearts, but not into each other's entire keeping. For only the hand of life can contain your hearts. And stand together, yet not too near together. For the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow. And let the winds of heavens dance between you." Rumi. When I, when I saw the song on the song sheet, call me, I said to him in an email, I said, "So I really like this song." And he says, "Well, we're going to update it a little bit." I says, "Well, oh, what are you going to do?" He says, "We're going to call it Text Me." I mentioned marriage before, and I got to share a little bit. I was telling Patty, I met my wife when I was 11 and she was 10 at Methodist church camp. And our parents parked us there because that's when the Methodist women's group was meeting at Green Mountain College. So by the time I was 13, I was madly in love with Gay Simmons. And we eventually got married at the Trinity Methodist Church in Albany. And in my college career, I was part of an a cappella singing group called the Colgate 13. And the group was at the wedding. And we had talked about doing a couple numbers, and I was really busy that day, so I didn't think much about it. And all of a sudden, I saw Gay on the arm of one of my singing mates, and they sat her in a chair, and we circled up. "You are the promises of love, and the angel glow." We sang her "All the Things You Are. And I had sung that song with the group a lot of times. But whenever I hear it or even think about it, I can see Gay sitting there in a wedding dress, surrounded by some of my best friends, singing that song. Now, Mike and Jeff are going to update that for you, but that's what they're going to play, I think. So it's over to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Man. When I introduced the band, I didn't introduce the most important person we have here next to me. Zach Nelson is over here, and he's making the sound work for us and for the video to work for you folks out there on the web. And we're grateful that you're here. And while I'm at affirmations, Ms. Geiger is over there in her usual position, sitting on a soft cushion, but she's also brought refreshments for us, and we are grateful to her for doing that. And now, if you want to support Jazz Vespers, because we are a self-supporting element here at church, we encourage you, there's a box on the wall out in the atrium, and you can slip something in the Jazz Vespers slot, and that will get to Jazz Vespers. And you can promote Jazz Vespers with our annual gala, which is coming up in November, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. It's going to be here, and it's going to be a full house, and it's going to be $20 a ticket. So bring your friends and celebrate with all of us as we listen to our friends play for their friends. I have another confession to make. I left the printout of my scripture reading on my printer. Yeah, so let me tell you about it. Jeremiah 32. The Babylonian army is surrounded Jerusalem, and Jeremiah is in jail because Jeremiah had been saying, you're going to get what's coming to you because you've been bad. And they didn't like that, but he was in kind of chambers in the center of the temple. And he needed to send a message. So he summoned his cousin and said, I want to buy your land over in the land of Benjamin. Here are 17 shillings of silver, and I'm going to deliver that to you. Here's the deed, sign it over to me, take the deed, put it in a secure place, and tell everybody that even with all this bedlam that's going on, with all this army that's got us surrounded, there will be a time when in Jerusalem, within Israel, we'll buy land, we'll shop, we'll do all the normal things of everyday life because the Lord has given us that blessing that things will return to normal. Now, it took centuries to return to normal, but the prophecy made it. And somewhere in a cave somewhere is a jar with a deed to some land, deeded over to Jeremiah. Mike, I really love what you do with the organ because it's a multi-dimensional sound. It's not that I don't like the piano sound, but it's really been really interesting and lovely to hear you. Yeah, yeah. I forgot an important element to my little story about Jeremiah. As we have lives that are chaotic and challenged and all of those things, then the Lord has given us the gift that balance will return. It's a promise fulfilled. I'm reminded of another quick story. Solomon was looking for something that assured himself, as the great king, that he was blessed. And he sent out his people, and they were looking for something, and they looked, and they came back, and we can't find anything. You got to do better than that. One of his squires was walking down a street in the market in Jerusalem, and he bemoaning the story of his life about this problem. And a merchant came out and said, "I've got just the thing for you." He says, "You do?" He says, "Yeah." He brings him in and he gives him this simple ring. And the guy says, "This will do it." So he brings it back to Solomon. And he shows him this simple ring. And Solomon looks, takes the ring, holds it up, and reads the engraving. And he says, "Oh, thank you very much." And he put it on his finger. And the engraving said, "This too shall pass." Speaking of gifts, I always like to share a little Mary Oliver here at Vespers. And this is called The Gift. And she wrote it when she was older than she had been, I think, from some of the words. It's called The Gift. "Be still, my soul, and steadfast. Earth and heaven both are still watching, though the time is draining from the clock, and your walk that was confident and quick has become slow. So be slow if you must, but let the heart still play its true part. Love still as once you loved deeply and without patience. Let God and the world know you are grateful that the gift has been given." We are all a gift. was Dingy? Dingy. Gingy. Oh, okay. Well, I loved it. That was great. That was great. Friday, Gay and I went up to Colgate, where I went to school, and where my granddaughter is a junior. And we go kind of halfway on the thruway and get off at Canajoharie and then kind of cut up to Route 20 and down Route 20. And I'm always amazed at how beautiful upstate New York is. And that particular road, you know, once you get out of Canajoharie, you don't see many other cars. And you're just there in the wonder of sunshine and trees and just a light touch of color coming on. And it was just gorgeous. Sometimes a ride in the country will take all the other stuff out of you. And we didn't have a lot of stuff in us, but we kind of enjoyed the ride. So I share with you a poem that's a song for autumn, and again, it's by Mary Oliver. And I wish you a ride in the country with the color about to bloom. In the deep fall, don't you imagine the leaves think how comfortable it will be to touch the earth instead of the nothingness of air and the endless freshness of wind? And don't you think the trees themselves, especially those with mossy, warm caves, begin to think of the birds that will come, 6, a dozen, to sleep inside their bodies? And don't you hear the goldenrod whispering goodbye, the everlasting being crowned with the first tuffets of snow? The pond vanishes, and the white field over which the fox runs so quickly brings out its blue shadows. And the wind pumps its bellows. And at evening especially, the piled firewood shifts a little, longing to be on its way. Mary Oliver. I'm old-fashioned. That's it. Brothers. Do, 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 do. Yesterday, the Stockade celebrated its walkabout, and our church was part of that. We had an open house. We had a lot of people come through. And I want to just touch base on two things so you don't miss them. On your way out the door, stop in the atrium because there's some art. We call the art display there art from the heart of the Stockade. And it's art done by members of the Stockade community and members of our church. And there's just some wonderful things there. So take a moment, deep breath, enjoy that. In the back of this room are prints of 4 Mohawk chiefs. And the originals were painted in 1711 in London. And the chiefs were visiting Queen Anne at her invitation and at the facilitation of a guy named Peter Schuyler, who was the famous Philip Schuyler's father. And they cut quite a figure in London, and so they had their portraits done in costume, but they had a rich and wonderful time. And what's interesting from a church that's pretty historical, 3 of the chiefs were members of First Reformed Church. And they carried greetings about that. The other element that's there is that they asked the Queen for protection from the French. And she promised to build them a fort, which she did. And the governor of New York at the time was a guy named Hunter, so we call it Fort Hunter. And she gave them a communion set, silver communion set for use in the Queen Anne's chapel that was part of the village there. And the Revelation came along and spoiled this stuff. The Mohawks who left with Johnson buried the silver. After the war, they were resettled along what is now the Brant River in Brantford, Ontario. Joseph Brant and his grandfather is the first painting on the left. Came back in the middle of the night and dug up that silver chalice from Queen Anne and brought it to Brantford, and it remains a key component of worship at communion time by the Episcopal Church in Brantford, Ontario. So I share that story of, if you think you're old-fashioned, think about those guys.
Okay.
that applause, I'm going to ask you to applause again for Mike and Jeff and Zechariah and Audrey. And I'm going to tell a quick story, and then they're going to play us out. I'm a big fan of the Irish blessing, and it stems from my grandmother. She had a needlepoint of it in her kitchen at the farm in Northfield, Massachusetts. And when I was about 6, I asked her if it had been hard to make. And she said she didn't make it, so it wasn't too hard. And the one that she made was easy. And I said, excuse me? She says, well, Mary Bolton brought in this nice piece. We thought we'd do it up and we'd make it needle-pointed for each other. So we each made it in needlepoint, and then we gave it to somebody. So my needlepoint hangs up in Sarah Howe's house, and this is the one that she made. I said, oh, that's wonderful. Now, isn't that a great way to share a blessing? So I leave you that story from my grandmother and these words. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the rain fall soft upon your fields. May the sun shine warm upon your face. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.